Do you ever wonder where your last name comes from? I'm Clara Benitez Cortez for Hispanic Heritage Month, and I took a look at the centuries-old origins.
History remembers revolutions, empires, and wars. Yet some of Mexico's oldest survivors were never monuments or kings. They were family names, quietly carried from one generation to the next. Imagine if a single parish register held the reason your surname still exists today. Behind these names lies a forgotten story of conquest, church records, colonial law, and local power. So which Mexican surname owes its survival to ink written inside a 16th century parish book? Let's begin with the first remarkable name. 1. Garcia, the patronym that became ubiquitous. Imagine opening a church book from the late 1500s. The pages are faded, the handwriting uneven, but one surname keeps appearing again and again: Garcia. Long before it became one of Mexico's most common family names, it was already being written into baptismal records across central New Spain. Family Search's colonial records show that parish priests were documenting names like Garcia from the earliest decades of Spanish rule. Once those records became the official proof of birth, marriage, and death, the surname gained something more valuable than popularity. It gained permanence. The name itself arrived from Spain, where Garcia had already existed for centuries. But its explosive growth in Mexico came from something less obvious. Every new parish, every mission, and every growing settlement added another page to the same story. Forebears now ranks Garcia among the country's most widespread surnames, a reminder that surviving history sometimes depended less on bloodlines than on who controlled the records. Yet another surname found a different route to the top, one tied not only to churches, but to the people running entire communities. 2. Hernandez, from Iberian patronym to Mexican staple. If you walked through several colonial towns in New Spain, chances are you'd hear the name Hernandez more than once before reaching the town's square. It wasn't unusual. The surname, meaning son of Hernando, spread quickly after Spanish settlement and soon appeared in parish books across different regions. Family Searchers compiled genealogies preserved countless Hernandez family lines, showing the name passing from one generation to the next with remarkable consistency. But numbers alone don't explain why it endured. In many communities, the people signing legal documents, collecting taxes, or witnessing marriages were among the few who could read and write. Their names naturally appeared in official records more often than everyone else's. Centuries later, Hernandez remains one of Mexico's most recognizable surnames, surviving wars, independence, and political change without ever disappearing from the historical record. The next surname tells a completely different story. Instead of staying rooted in one place, it survived because families kept moving. 3. Lopez, the name that traveled with migration. Some surnames stay where they begin. Lopez didn't. As towns expanded and opportunities shifted, families carrying the name packed up and headed somewhere new. Some followed mining booms. Others searched for farmland or growing trade routes. Silver discoveries in places like Zacatecas drew thousands of families north, and every new settlement required fresh parish books where familiar surnames appeared all over again. Every move left another paper trail behind. A child baptized in one parish might later marry hundreds of kilometers away, linking two distant communities through the same surname. Family Search genealogies repeatedly connect Lopez families across regions, while modern genealogy records tracing Mexican heritage reveal how later migration into the United States extended that chain even further. Instead of fading with distance, the surname became harder to lose because it appeared in more churches, more civil offices, and eventually more border records. Today, Lopez ranks among Mexico's most familiar surnames, not simply because families grew, but because they rarely stayed in one place for long. But movement wasn't the only path to survival. One famous surname barely needed to travel at all. 4. Martinez, the patronym that anchored in parishes. Unlike some families who crossed provinces searching for opportunity, many Martinez households left historians something even more valuable: continuity. Generation after generation, the surname kept resurfacing in the same parish books. Baptisms became marriages. Marriages became burials. The records formed an almost uninterrupted timeline that stretched across decades. Then, after civil registration was introduced in 1859, those same families appeared again in government archives. The paperwork changed, but the surname did not. That steady documentary trail helps explain why Martinez remains one of Mexico's most common surnames today. The family wasn't preserved by legend or folklore. It was preserved by clerks, priests, and civil registrars who copied the same name into official books year after year. Sometimes history isn't hidden inside dramatic events. Sometimes it's hidden inside ordinary paperwork. The next surname proves that when property and legal contracts entered the picture, survival became even more likely. 5. Gonzalez. When patronyms meet local power, not every surname became famous because there were thousands of people carrying it. Some became impossible to ignore because they kept appearing wherever important decisions were being made. That's part of the story behind Gonzalez. Beyond parish registers, the surname turns up in notarial records, land sales, wills, inheritance disputes, and contracts preserved in historical archives. Every legal transaction added another layer to its history. Property boundaries, dowries, livestock sales, and inheritance settlements all depended on written agreements, giving established families another reason to appear repeatedly in official archives. Unlike spoken family traditions, documents don't rely on memory. Once a notary recorded a name, it became part of the permanent record. Compiled genealogies also reveal Gonzalez families reappearing across multiple generations, suggesting that many remained deeply connected to local institutions and property ownership. Those legal footprints helped the surname survive political upheaval that erased countless other traces of everyday life. As this list continues, an interesting pattern begins to emerge. The longest-lasting surnames weren't simply inherited, they were constantly rewritten into Mexico's history. And the next name may be the clearest example yet. 6. Parish, the name recorded by priests and scribes. A surname can survive simply because someone kept writing it down. That was the quiet advantage behind Perez. Like many Spanish patronymic names, it crossed the Atlantic during the colonial period, but its real strength came after arrival. Every baptism, marriage, and burial required a priest to record names with remarkable consistency. Over the decades, those entries became the closest thing colonial Mexico had to birth certificates. Family searches, compiled genealogies bring together thousands of those parish records, showing Perez families appearing repeatedly across different settlements and generations. Once a surname entered the church's books, descendants inherited more than a family name. They inherited an official identity recognized by both religious and civil authorities. For countless indigenous communities, however, this process came at a cost. Christian surnames often replaced older naming traditions, leaving little trace of what existed before Spanish rule. That raises an unsettling thought. If priests helped redefine identity on paper, which surname best reveals how colonial record-keeping permanently reshaped Mexico's family history? 7. Rodriguez, the surname in parish and census. Some surnames flicker into history for a generation and disappear. Rodriguez never really did. You can trace it through centuries, almost like following footprints. It appears in colonial parish registers, then resurfaces in 19th century civil records, and later shows up again in modern censuses. The paperwork changes, but the surname keeps returning. When Mexico introduced nationwide civil registration in the 19th century, countless Rodriguez families simply continued the documentary trail that parish priests had started hundreds of years earlier. Instead of beginning a new history, government registrars extended an older one already preserved inside church archives. Four Bears still places Rodriguez among the country's most widespread surnames, evidence that continuity can be surprisingly durable once institutions begin recording it. Yet those uninterrupted records tell only one side of the story. Every familiar surname that survived often coincided with countless indigenous identities quietly disappearing from official documents. The next name shows how local communities, not just governments. 8. Sanchez, from patronym to regional pillar. Drive across Mexico, and you'll notice something curious. Certain surnames seem to belong almost everywhere, while others become unexpectedly concentrated in particular regions. Sanchez is one of those names with strong local roots. Although it's spread across the country, historical records reveal clusters where Sanchez families remained connected through generations of marriages, inherited property, and close-knit communities. Parish books preserved those relationships year after year, recording baptisms, weddings, and burials within the same networks. Regional histories discussing Mexico's oldest surviving surnames often point to names like Sanchez because they never completely dispersed. Instead, they built deep foundations inside specific states before gradually expanding outward. In many villages, generations married within neighboring communities, meaning the same surnames appeared repeatedly in local baptism and marriage registers. That pattern matters. A surname doesn't always become powerful by traveling widely. Sometimes it survives because families stay close, marrying into neighboring households and reinforcing the same name across an entire district. The next surname followed a different path altogether. Its history was written less by family ties and more by legal paperwork that refused to disappear. 9. Ramirez, the surname written into legal memory. Imagine opening a 400-year-old notarial ledger. Between property sales, inheritance disputes, and business agreements, one surname keeps resurfacing: Ramirez. These weren't dramatic moments worthy of history books. They were everyday transactions. Yet together, they created something incredibly durable. Unlike oral tradition, legal documents don't rely on memory. Once a notary copied a family name onto a contract, that record could survive for centuries inside an archive. Historical collections preserved through archival repositories contain countless examples of these routine legal papers, while compiled genealogies connect many Ramirez families back to parish registers already documenting earlier generations. The two systems reinforced each other, making the surname unusually resilient. It's easy to assume history is preserved by famous battles or powerful rulers. More often, it survives inside ordinary paperwork that nobody expected future generations to read. The next surname owes its endurance not to contracts or courts, but to one of the most powerful symbols in Christianity. 10. Cruz, a faith-driven survival. Not every enduring surname began as a family name. For many people living in colonial Mexico, baptism marked the beginning of an entirely new, recorded identity. During conversion, some adopted deeply Christian names, and a few carried stronger symbolism than cruz, the Spanish word for cross. Church registers carefully documented those baptisms, preserving the new names chosen or assigned during religious conversion. Over time, cruz became more than a declaration of faith. It became a hereditary surname passed from parents to children, long after the original ceremony had been forgotten. Genealogical guides from both Family Search and the Library of Congress show just how central parish records became for tracing families through colonial Mexico. Those books preserved generations of Cruz families, even when older indigenous naming traditions disappeared from the written record. The irony is difficult to ignore. A name born from conversion eventually became part of countless family histories, and the next surname proves that religion wasn't the only force shaping the names that still define Mexico today. 11. Ramirez versus Ramirez. Spelling and survival. A missing accent. One extra letter. Sometimes that's all it takes to hide an entire family line. Anyone digging through colonial records quickly discovers that surnames weren't always spelled the same way. A priest might write Ramirez in one parish, while a clerk in another town recorded the very same family as Ramirez. Neither version was necessarily considered wrong. Standardized spelling simply wasn't a priority for many record keepers. Accents were frequently omitted, silent letters came and went, and many clerks simply wrote names the way they sounded in everyday conversation. That's why Family Search encourages researchers to search for surname variants when tracing Mexican ancestry. Old parish books and compiled genealogies often preserve the same lineage under multiple spellings, while surviving archival documents reveal how handwriting, pronunciation, and local custom could change a name from one generation to the next. To modern eyes, they look like different families. In reality, they may share the same ancestors. It serves as a reminder that history isn't only lost through missing records. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight because the spelling quietly changed. The next surname tells a different story, one tied not to changing letters, but to a place that helped preserve an entire family. 12. Luna, a toponymic thread. Some surnames point to a profession, others describe a parent. Luna does something different. It points your attention toward a place. Names connected to locations often leave unusually clear trails because families tend to remain associated with the same communities for generations. Every baptism, marriage, and burial recorded in a familiar parish strengthens that connection, making descendants easier to trace through time. Colonial church records, preserved by Family Search, repeatedly show how local parishes became the center of family history. If several generations stayed within the same district, their surname appeared over and over in the same books. Modern surname data also places Luna among the established family names still found throughout Mexico today. It's an overlooked advantage. A family that remains rooted often leaves behind a cleaner documentary trail than one constantly on the move. But geography wasn't the only force shaping Mexico's surnames. Some of the most enduring names emerged where Spanish traditions and indigenous communities gradually became one. 13. Mendez, patronym, mestizaje, and record keeping. Not every surname spread because large Spanish families arrived in Mexico. Many became common through something much slower. As churches spread alongside Spanish settlements, they took on another role besides religion. They became the keepers of identity. Baptism registers increasingly recorded Spanish surnames, leaving many indigenous naming traditions outside the official record. Mendez is one example of a patronymic surname that benefited from that process. Compiled genealogies connect the name across generations, while historical genealogy guides explain how parish records gradually became the backbone of family identity throughout New Spain. Over time, those written records outlasted memory itself. Languages changed, communities changed, governments changed. The surname remained. That endurance reflects one of colonial Mexico's biggest paradoxes. The same records that help descendants trace their ancestors today also reveal how many earlier naming traditions slowly disappeared from official history. The next surname survived through movement instead of mixing, following merchants and travelers across the country. 14. Navarro, migration, trade, and name survival. Some surnames spread because people conquered territory. Others spread because they followed opportunity. Navarro belongs firmly in the second group. Originally identifying someone connected to Navarre in northern Spain, the surname gradually appeared across different parts of Mexico as families moved with expanding trade routes, new settlements, and commercial centers. Merchants rarely stayed in one town forever. Their work carried them from market to market, leaving business records, parish registrations, and civil documents in several locations instead of just one. Genealogy resources documenting Mexican heritage show how migration created multiple paper trails for the same family, while modern surname data confirms Navarro's continued presence across the country. Movement turned out to be surprisingly effective insurance against being forgotten. The more places a family appeared, the more archives eventually preserved its name. Trade may have expanded Navarro's reach, but another surname endured for a completely different reason. It became popular through faith, tradition, and a surprisingly simple choice made at baptism. 15. Flores. Floral names and cultural adoption. Of all the surnames on this list, Flores sounds almost poetic. Unlike names tied to fathers or hometowns, it carries an image, flowers. That simple meaning may have helped make it appealing during the colonial period, especially as Christian naming customs spread through newly established parishes. The story of Flores isn't hidden inside one dramatic event. It's scattered across hundreds of ordinary moments. A baptism in Puebla, a marriage in Guanajuato, a birth recorded decades later in a government office instead of a parish. Separately, those entries mean very little. Together, they explain why the surname is still so recognizable centuries later. Sometimes history survives because nobody stopped copying the same name. Sometimes a name endured because it was adopted early, written carefully, and repeated consistently for centuries. By now, a pattern has become impossible to ignore. The surnames that survived weren't necessarily the oldest or the largest. They were the ones history kept recording, and the final two names reveal just how powerful that simple truth really is. 16. Ortiz, legal records, marriage, and persistence. Not every family left behind castles or fortunes. Some left something historians value just as much, a long paper trail. That's where Ortiz stands out. While parish registers recorded births and baptisms, marriage records often reveal how the surname stayed alive through carefully documented family connections. A wedding wasn't simply a religious ceremony. It created a legal relationship that priests, notaries, and eventually civil officials copied into their books. Those records matter because they link generations together. Family searchers compiled genealogies regularly connect Ortiz families through marriages spanning decades, while surviving notarial documents show the same surname appearing in wills, property transfers, and inheritance agreements. Every signature, witness list, or marriage entry strengthened the family's place in the historical record. It's easy to think surnames survive by chance. More often, they survive because ordinary life keeps producing documents that nobody expected future generations to read. One final surname brings every piece of this story together, revealing the bigger reason these names refused to disappear. 17. Vargas, the last name that carried on. By now, one pattern should feel impossible to ignore. Whether the surname was Garcia, Flores, Ortiz, or Vargas, survival rarely happened by accident. Vargas appears in parish registers, resurfaces in compiled genealogies, and remains among the established surnames found across Mexico today. Different records, different centuries, same family name. Taken on its own, that doesn't seem remarkable. Together, those documents tell a much larger story. A baptism placed a child into the written record. A marriage connected one generation to the next. A land sale, or will carried the surname into legal archives. Later, civil registries continued recording the same families long after colonial rule had ended. Each new document confirmed the one before it, creating a chain of evidence that modern genealogists can still follow across 4 centuries. That's why these names endured while countless others faded from official history. They were repeatedly written, copied, witnessed, and preserved. The biggest surprise wasn't which surnames survived, it was what preserved them. Parish registers, legal ledgers, and later civil records quietly turned ordinary family names into historical landmarks, while countless others vanished from the written record. Which archival fact surprised you most? And which surname would you research first? Share your thoughts below.